A couple of H.P. Lovecraft-inspired horror games were developed by Stormling Studios, mainly three Turkish dudes, in the years 2007 and 2009. These are Darkness Within, In Pursuit of Loath, Nolder, and Darkness Within 2, The Dark Lineage. Before we go on, however, I have to address the most pressing question. WTF is a Loath Nolder? The answer is it's a guy, an NPC in the games whom you are pursuing, yet it doesn't answer the strangeness of his name. As far as I could find on the internet, Loath is not an actual name in English at least, although Loth Loath appears to have been a medieval name or an alternative spelling of Lot from the Bible. Nolder is apparently an actual surname, but a rare one. Let's get to Darkness Within. Both games are graphical first-person adventure games where the gameplay mainly consists of solving puzzles and reading old books and notes. There are significant technical differences between the first and the second game, but I will get to that later. Where the games excel are mood and atmosphere. The first game especially is very subdued in its storytelling, creating a unique experience, whereas the second one feels more familiar yet atmospheric. Movement in Darkness Within, In Pursuit of Loath Nolder, happens on a preset grid, or rather you move between preset screens like in games like Myst, although you can tilt the camera to look around. You click on objects to examine them closer, to interact or pick them up. Occasionally you use objects on other objects, such as a key, to open a door. Groundbreaking stuff. Like Myst, there are very few NPCs to converse with outside of a few cutscenes or phone conversations. However, there is one somewhat novel mechanic when reading notes. And there are countless pages of text to read, so be prepared for that in case you intend to load up the game yourself. When reading certain documents, you have to underline certain passages to create clues in the protagonist's head. On some occasions, you have to combine those clues in the protagonist's head to come up with new clues to advance the story. While in theory this sounds rather exciting, in actuality it feels somewhat arbitrary which passages the game considers to be vital information and which are not. I think you even have to highlight the passages in the right order, otherwise it doesn't work. Likewise, it's hard grasping the game's logic on combining clues in your mind. The interface for doing so is clunky to use. Before I forget, the game is dark. Not in the sense of dealing with dark subject matters, well actually that is true as well, but it can get dark. Even if you use a flashlight, it can be difficult making out where you are going or spotting important objects. But let's get to the story. There will be spoilers. You are Howard Loreed, a former police detective. Notice another weird name, Loreed? Not Lou Reed, though. Howard obviously comes from Howard Phillips Lovecraft. You start off in the Wellsmouth mental institution. Notice another weird name. Howard is making excuses why he did something crazy at a graveyard. He had been looking for Loath Nolder, who'd disappeared 5 years prior, but had become a suspect in a murder investigation. Then the game does the thing, I bet you're wondering how I got here, and you go back in time 2 weeks to your apartment. You wake up with your cell phone ringing, not the cord phone though. Your buddy Arthur, another cop, calls telling you that Loath Nolder had escaped from the hospital. Howard heads out to his old office to get some clues, mainly old pictures of Nolder's office. He used to be a PI, I think. There's also a register of death for one Clark Field. He's the man Nolder is suspected of having killed. Then we're off to Nolder's office. There's a 5-year-old calendar on the wall and a weird list of codes in his desk drawer. Of course, there's a newspaper and some mythology stuff to read too. Looking at the old photos of the office, Howard notices one of the paintings has been moved. Inside it is an envelope. Once Howard figures out how to use a letter opener on it, you can get the contents. Instead of using objects on other objects like most games, you have to go to the brain menu in your clues inventory, put the envelope and the letter opener in the tray, and press the cog icon. It's needlessly convoluted. It's a letter from Clark Field, the murder victim, to his brother Jonathan. He mentions he bought a creepy old house. A key and address are included. There's also Field's journal where he mentions a Norwegian immigrant, Ivar Bergen. It's mentioned how the house is old and the quarter it's in has a bad reputation. He's gotten closer to Ivar. Clark mentions a weird wooden statue he found and he managed to open some secret compartment in it, and a strange well-like opening in the basement of the house. He plans to restore the house and possibly investigate the well further. Field's house is fairly big with several rooms in 2 floors, in addition to the basement. In the bedroom is a partially decayed book talking about Eleusinian mysteries and some hallucinogenic drink they used to imbibe for their rituals. A German alchemist from the 14th century, Wolfgang Schneider, is mentioned in context of a process called eclipse of the soul. The word Dversahe is somehow connected to the metamorphosis of the soul. Then, summoning of the one who lies beneath is mentioned in connection to ancient Egypt. The book also alludes to Apep, the Egyptian chaos serpent, and Maat, the ancient Egyptian concept of truth, justice, and the American way. Some of this information will be relevant later, much later, yet you cannot highlight any clues from it, nor does the protagonist take the book with him. So you better remember which book it was that mentioned this stuff and where it was several hours down the line if you want to refresh your memory. Elsewhere in the house are notes from Mr. Field's exploration of the creepy well. He found a horizontal tunnel in the side of the opening where he discovered strange statues with saurian heads. He heard scary noises and escaped. Howard goes exploring the creepy well by himself. The cellar room before the well, though, has a harmel smell. Harmel apparently refers to a certain kind of plant. I only learned the meaning of the word after finishing the game. Our intrepid detective ties a rope to some pipes above, picks up a lantern, and descends. The tunnel has collapsed. There's only a dark, narrow gap with some sort of gas leaking out of it. There's nothing of interest there except Field's electronic schedule. However, I missed it the first time and had to go back for it later. His library or office has the strange wooden statue with a hidden compartment mentioned in Field's notes before, and a calendar with a few marked dates. There's a notebook mentioning how the guy liked to record strange sounds and that he was 22 years old when Clark and his brother became owners of their father's company through inheritance. Howard heads back to the well to get the scheduler. He doesn't seem to be alone though, as the creepy noises suggest. He quickly hauls his ass to the surface. I'm not sure whether you can die at this point if you dilly-dally too long in the danger zone though. Afterwards, Howard announces he doesn't feel well and wants to go home. Somebody knocks on the door, waking him up. But then he checks it out, but nobody's there. It's merely darker and weirder than usual. The radio is going funky too. A second knock on the door, but nothing out there but darkness and noise. Then the dark figure appears in the apartment and Howard wakes up in the madhouse with the staff discussing his nightmares. Soon after he's back on the bed in his apartment. Howard tells us he was found screaming in the middle of the night due to nervous breakdown 3 days ago and suspended from duty. He doesn't remember it. Howard seems to be a schizo, so he takes his meds. Now he has Clarkfield's organizer, but it's password protected. There's a hint though. When will the triumphant witch be reborn? Howard just happens to have a random poetry book in his home with a poem titled Time of the Triumphant Witch. However, good luck remember it at this point, since at least I perused through it in the very beginning of the game. It says something about boys who will be sacrificed when they're 18, and so far there have been 6 sacrifices. One guy had the Roman numerals XI written on his forehead before death, and the year 1699 is noted as significant. However, the poem mentions mirrors, so the XI becomes IX. With all of that, you can calculate the correct year. It's probably easy if you're good at maths. Then the scheduler asks you to enter a date. I tried various dates marked on Field's calendar or mentioned in the papers he's written, but none of them do anything. Entering H.P. Lovecraft's day of birth and death are Easter eggs, though. Going back to Field's house, Howard discovers a briefcase out in the open with more papers to read. I'm not sure whether I simply missed it earlier or it was unavailable previously. It talks about the hallucinogenic drug Dversahe that can lead to madness if taken under heightened emotional states. Howard begins to wonder whether he's been affected by the drug. In the library/office is another briefcase that had gone unnoticed. It's locked with a 4-digit code though. Since Field is forgetful, Howard wonders what kind of number he would find important. It's the year he was 22 and he inherited his father's company. Our intrepid detective heads back to his own office to look at the year Mr. Field was born and add 22 to it. I have to point some bullshit out. When you first look at the register of death, the protagonist cannot record any information from it, such as the date of birth or death of the victim. Note the absence of any small panel on the bottom left corner of the screen. Now though, when you go back, the panel is there and you can highlight information. This is excessively convoluted and only serves to confuse the player and waste time by forcing you to backtrack. Now I understand why Howard has been suspended, as a competent detective would write down this basic information about the victim. In addition to the specific clues you can exhume from old documents, Howard should have a notebook where he automatically records obvious clues. Opening the briefcase reveals the sound recorder and some notes. The notes mention the Norwegian Ivar having a secret meeting place in Northwood Forest. Such a unique name for a wooded area. Ivar took Mr. Field there. There are legends of weird people in animal skins in Northwood. The strange poet Edwin Pickman, who is also Howard's favorite poet, is name dropped as well. The paper also mentions how Field had dropped his digital organizer. So, were we supposed to open this briefcase before getting the organizer? Talking about the organizer, the important date for it is track 8 in Field's recordings. It tells you how to find the meeting place in Northwood. It would have been nice to be able to glean more personal details about our dead guy here by inputting more dates into the organizer, but apparently there's only one date that is relevant. That sucks. Afterwards, Howard complains he feels ill again and we head home to sleep. We wake up suspended from the rope at the well. Then Howie falls, ending up in a stone corridor out of your average dungeon crawler RPG with bones and a torch underneath. Sharpening a bone allows him to pry open the door. There's a chamber with a crocodile-headed statue and a spiral staircase. He has a ring Howard recognizes. After solving a puzzle with cogs, he can go upstairs. There's a crypt with strange symbols. One of the alcoves has a similar eye-like symbol as the ring. Pulling the casket and opening it reveals a skeleton with glowing eyes, causing Howard to wake up. Looking at the clock reveals he's been asleep for 2 days. Howie heads to the bathroom to get his meds, but he notices they taste strange. There's also a note mentioning a meeting at the cabin after midnight. Howard phones Arthur to ask him to have the meds analyzed. We drop them off at the office where our pal will get them later. Driving to the creepy cabin up north, Howard spots a guy standing outside on a cliff. He's Edwin Pickman, the poet, and also the only NPC in this game you talk to personally outside of a cutscene. Arguably. He says he has problems, but he is able to handle them by himself. Howie turns around and the guy disappears. Did he jump or just teleport away? Pickman left behind a quatrain, though. Finally, we arrive at the creepy cabin. There's an ominous raven waiting outside. The animal can be seen in another location, and clicking it several times will earn an achievement, yet it serves no actual purpose for the story. Inside the kitchen, Howard finds paint thinner. Another room has a blank sheet of paper on a table suggesting it's significant, yet we can't do anything to it yet. Next to an atmospherically lit window is a paintbrush with paint dried on it. Unfortunately, you cannot use the thinner on the brush. The game says it doesn't make sense when you try. Well, later on you have to do the obvious with them, but you have to pour the thinner into a container. I really would appreciate the game to tell me it needs me to do that. The room has a locked trapdoor. Therefore, Howard explores the second floor first. There's just a couple of locked roll-top desks. Returning to the hallway, some guy appears who seems to recognize Howard, or Loreed as he calls you. At this point, I didn't even know Loreed was the protagonist's last name. He'd sent the note in Howie's bathroom. He gives Howard a key. The intrepid detective feels a streak of yellow down his pant leg and goes home. He dreams being on a small rocky island in the middle of the sea. When he looks up, there's an eclipse in the sky. Then Howard heads back to the cabin in the woods after waking up. Unfortunately, there are lights in the windows and somebody else is in. Still, he won't chicken out. The key received from the guy last time opens the trapdoor. We are going deeper underground. The smell matches that of Mr. Field's cellar. There's a weird metal cupboard that's locked and some crosshair thingy on top. Weird stone sculptures on the wall. One has symbols on the back. An eye symbol is drawn on the corridor wall. One room has a crate full of guns and a metal cage that's electrified. Another room seems to be a prison. Howard talks to a crazy guy through the slit in the door. This is arguably the other NPC you can talk to, but you could also argue it's a cutscene. He talks about tremors and alludes to something nasty below. There's another prison door opposite to the crazy guys, but it's too dark. Luckily, there's a candle on the table. However, the mechanics of how to use the candle on darkness are not as simple as one might wish. Eventually, Howie manages it. Inside is someone's dark, creepy jacket with a key in the pocket and some papers. The notes were written by Clark Field. He had been held in the cell. Not held in the cell. He'd noticed changes in Ivar, who'd become paler and less social. Gasp. He turned into an incel. He was on the brink of mental breakdown. That was the last time Field saw him. Field had been hearing screams and other strange sounds underneath his house. He mentions tremors as well. There was a newspaper in Loath Nolder's office reporting an earthquake. Then Howard goes deeper into the underground tunnel, but it gets too dark to proceed. For some reason, he refuses to bring the candle with him. As we turn back, though, someone speaks, although we never see him. But we finally meet him, Loath Nolder. Howard is rightfully creeped out by the guy, but he rolls over like a beta doggy as he tells Nolder he's unarmed, practically begging for the fugitive not to harm him. Nolder accepts his own superiority but admits he too is without a gun. Then Nolder tells Howard that he has to figure out the rest by himself, although the guy hadn't really told us anything of value anyways. Then the fugitive tells Howard that they're coming and we should leave quickly. Back in the corridor, Howie hears voices. He has to hide in one of the rooms on the side, waiting for the others to go past. I'm not sure whether you can die here if you spend too much time screwing around. Once the coast is clear, Howard goes home and to bed. He wakes up in a cave with blue crystals and a strange musical instrument. He has to gather a few domino blocks to get the right notes for the music puzzle. It causes tremors and Howard wakes up in his bed again. He complains tiredness and the clock reveals he's been asleep for 3 days. Howard calls Arthur, who informs us that the test results of the drug are done. It's a neural medicine mixed with a hallucinogen. Has somebody been playing little practical joke on poor little Howie? Back to the creepy cabin we go. The key from Mr. Field's jacket opens the desk on the second floor. It contains another key and some papers to read. They describe the wooden sculptures with some kind of puzzle and a hidden compartment. Apparently, some guy called Mr. Kerven had brought them from Africa. Inside one of the sculptures were a dead eyeless bug and some leaves. According to Mr. Kerven, they are used in making dversahe. The other desk opens up, revealing more text to read. Yay! There's also an old map. One paper mentions a package with parchment someone sent with an Ouroboros that is supposedly a key of some kind. Another paper written by Shalif bin Humar mentions a local legend about a buried city and some strange hieroglyphics. A third paper from IB mentioned the EB problem that had been taken care of. Presumably, they'd killed someone. A weird code is mentioned that should somehow be used to communicate. There's also three metal sticks in a jar on the desk. Yoink! Howard heads back underground. A key he's acquired opens the metal cabinet, revealing a bunch of maps. Alas, there's too many, so he doesn't know which one is important. Next up is Clark Field's house. One key reveals a bonus room that presumably is not necessary for completing the game. There's alchemy stuff and even some dice for role-playing games. Another previously locked room reveals some paintings that don't have any significance except reminding me of Resident Evil. Further ahead is a dining room, but Howard doesn't find anything there yet, except a news article talking about an upcoming eclipse. Going back to the cabin in the woods again, Howard notices putty in the room with the electrified cage that will come in handy. He puts paint thinner into a pot in the kitchen and cleans the paintbrush. He dips it in ink upstairs. Then he figures out the strange encrypted message is a phone number and calls it. Nobody answers though, but he asks Arthur to figure out who owns the number. Afterwards, he descends back underground into the room with the maps and those strange statues. One of them had symbols on the back. He applies putty on it and swipes the shapes with the inked brush. Then finally we can find a use for the blank sheet of paper by pressing the inked symbols on the putty against it. Some of them look familiar. Loath Nolder's office had a weird list with some sort of codes on it. Howard finds a familiar symbol. Next to it are letters WMT. There are three other entries with the same letters. Turns out they are coordinates on a map. Returning to the map cabinet at the cabin, Howard takes the map with the right numbers from the cabinet and puts it on top. He marks the four different coordinates on the map. There are some locations he'd never heard of, like Red Sound, Timberwar, Holstone, and Wolfspree. Ivar's cabin is marked with the eye symbol, though. Howard heads back to Field's place once again and notices he can actually go around the dining table in the dining room. There's another one of those wooden sculptures. This one is unopened. He inserts the three metal sticks from the cabin into it, fiddles around, and it opens. Inside are a dead bug and some leaves, as the document mentions. Howard starts to feel unwell again and passes out in the house. He comes to in a hallway resembling the entrance to his home, but things are a bit wonky. There's an attic room where he finds a wooden box with a circular sliding puzzle. Beyond the puzzle is a dream catcher, like the one he has in his own apartment. Another room shows reality being ripped apart, but throwing in the dream catcher fixes things. Then we get a vision of some guy being pulled across the floor, and Howard is home again. This time he'd slept 4 days. Arthur calls saying he's been trying to contact Howie for days. How long does his phone battery last anyways? I haven't seen him charge it. Arthur says the phone number we gave him belongs to Edward Braubel. EB? He lives in Rowley, northeast of Wellsmouth. Shit went down there 200 years prior with Puritans burning houses and the government stepping in as there were claims of witchcraft. Apparently the place used to be called Holstone back then. Howie has heard of the place. There's a mansion, but next to it is an even older building that seems more interesting. First he has to take a piss though. Afterwards he notices a mortar and pestle with weird goop in the bathroom and throws it away. At the new location, Howard set his eyes on the old building. He knocks on the door, no answer. The raven is there again. You have to fuck around for a while and come back to the door so Howie notices it's unlocked. You can't try to open it right after knocking though. One of my favorite mechanics on display here. You had to try something again that failed already, but only after an arbitrary time limit. Inside is a macabre African tribesman statue. Sort of reminds me of Monkey Island. In a hallway, Howard discovers another trapdoor. This time he had to move some furniture. There's also a note with numbers. Before descending, the detective goes up to the tower. There's a letter from Loath Nolder. He used to be friends with the old guy who lived there. It mentions the alchemist Wolfgang Schneider and the wooden sculptures. In another letter, Nolder admits he illegally, without euphemisms, obtained the parchment written by the Schneider guy. A chest with a number lock sits in the corner. Luckily, we found a note with the numbers earlier. Inside is a book about some ancient cult, the Children of Dis. They used hallucinogens in their rituals. There's a piece of some sort of seal as well. Finally, Howard is brave enough to go down into the trapdoor. After finding a key, he stumbles into an underground temple with Saurian statues. There's a palanquin with ornate discs inside at one end of the corridor, as well as some spinning thingy. The other corridor has a sealed door, so puzzling time it is with some of the crap we gathered. On the other side is water and the flashlight batteries are dying. There are disturbing sounds and a ghastly woman there. Howard tries to escape in fright, yet the door is locked. There's a strange apparition. He loses consciousness but comes to at the trapdoor. Leaving the accursed place, Howard ends up in Nolder's office. He's got a book that mentions the town of Windlaps was called Wolfspree in the past. It was on that old map. Before he can head to the cemetery at Windlaps, Howie has to go back to the old cabin to find a secret attic. One document mentions that a tomb bearing the name Samuel William Power will be important. Before venturing further into the cemetery, Howard needs some basic idea where to look. There's a fancy looking administration building with secret hiding places. The normal registers don't mention Samuel William Poor, but the stash under the stairs reveals it to be on the west side. Walking around aimlessly, the intrepid idiot-armed detective finds a crypt with the serpentine eye symbol in front. Inside, in front of a locked door, are five round holes, matching the amount of discs we have. Between some discs are symbols. You can rotate the discs to change the symbols. They have to be put in the right order and rotated the correct way to open the door. Remember that book talking about the eclipse of the soul on Clark Field's bed? That supposedly gives clues to this puzzle, and so do the three symbols on the back of the statues underneath the cabin. On the other side, at the end of the corridor, is a well of some sort. Howard ties a rope to bars behind him to descend. He ends up in a crypt with a large crocodile statue from much earlier on. Howard climbs the stairs, questioning his sanity. In the coffin he opened in the dream is a mummy and a golden medallion with a familiar symbol. He says it's his family symbol, the Loreed symbol. He doesn't want to be related to these people, whoever they are, trying to leave the place. How he meets a man saying cryptic stuff like, it was foretold he'd be there. Something magical seems to happen, and once again, Howard passes out. He's back at the asylum. That is the end of Darkness Within, in pursuit of Loath Nolder. There's one interesting detail. Despite the game having all kinds of allusions to all sorts of dark and horrendous stuff, we don't really see anything outside of dreams and weird statues, nor are any names from Lovecraft's mythos mentioned. This changes in the sequel. I wonder whether it's because when the first game came out in 2007, Lovecraft's work was still copyrighted, but in 2008 his writing became public domain in the US at least. Darkness Within 2 was released in 2009, so they had the legal right to use whatever Lovecraftian references they wanted. This isn't entirely a good thing though, since the sequel lacks some of the subdued atmosphere of the original. Before continuing to Darkness Within 2, there's something I want to address. The corridor leading to Howard's apartment. There are four identical green doors at the corridor. One of them leads to his place, and the others are irrelevant. The other end has a dark exit leading out of the building. However, when you arrive at the place, Howard is situated with his back against the wall. The door is on the right leading into the apartment. What I tended to assume is that Howard had arrived from the location behind his back, so I would walk forward, but that just takes me further from the apartment door. What would make sense is that Howard would be standing with his back facing the exit and his front facing toward the other end of the corridor with his front door on the left, or just have him be inside the apartment. It's a minor issue in the grand scheme of things, but very nonsensical. Darkness Within 2, The Dark Legacy continues the story and the dark legacy of the Loreed family, as one might guess. However, mechanically it's quite different. This time Howard can move freely, like in any FPS, using WASD. He can even jump and stack boxes. Unfortunately, the ability to play with physics to move objects isn't really used for anything, except moving some things out of the way. Or maybe I should say fortunately, since some of the physics don't work the way they should. Exploring can be dangerous as I fell through the world several times and was forced to reload. The game crashed quite often, with most of my streams ending with one. Examining documents and highlighting the text seems a bit less obtuse in the sequel, and there's even a quick highlight button that finds the relevant entries on the page. Without further ado, let's look at the story of Darkness Within 2. Howard is back in the mental asylum. The doctors are about to operate on him when a creepy cadaver walks into the theater. He somehow takes over the doctor and gives Howard some drug. I think it's not exactly clear what transpires there. The intrepid detective wakes up in an old abandoned house, which introduces us to the new controls. A note from Loath Nolder says he brought Howard there for his own good. He left us some clothes and money, and we should be going to a town called Arkamend, not Arkham, Arkamend, totally different. There we should go to Worm's Feast and ask for a book called Recollections of the Past. He also warns against revealing one's true identity. The sequel displays its cool flashlight mechanics. Howie takes a train to Arkamend. It's a snowy and depressing place, like Finland, the happiest country in the world. Howard notes that the place looks familiar. First off, he heads to the inn to converse with the innkeeper. Yes, in Darkness Within 2, there are actual NPCs walking around, although still not many. Some of them you can talk to, while others are just background decoration. After falling through the world, Howard talks to the innkeeper. He informs us that Worm's Feast is a bookshop, but it's closed for the night. Have to try the next day. So Howard books a room, is on the second floor. Once again, it feels familiar to him. On the nightstand is a newspaper reporting on a bunch of archaeologists who found an underground city with statues depicting reptilian humanoids. Alas, there had been a collapse at the dig, seemingly cutting them off from the place. In my opinion, this denotes departure from the subtle weirdness of the first game, as most strange stuff was only experienced by Howard and could arguably be dismissed as dreams and delusions. If a bunch of archaeologists found an underground city with those statues, it means the rest of the world is quite a different place than originally thought, unless Howard is merely imagining the news article. Howard has a weird dream, although he is still in the same room. I should note a small detail though. The first game tends to ask whether you want to sleep or go through a door to another area or not, whereas the second one immediately makes it happen, transitioning into the next section. So if you wanted to do some snooping before sleeping, you can't if you happen to click on the bed. The paintings are different. One depicts an eclipse, then Howard pulls a chest of drawers away from the wall, revealing a hole leading into the neighboring room. A weird old man resembling Donald Pleasence says he's a prisoner just like Howard. He warns against leaving because there's only darkness out there. He gives a key with a skeleton face. Unsurprisingly, it opens the door. Out in the hallway, Howard hears voices in his head. He steps into another room with an old man sitting in a chair that tells him to go to the tomb and follow the old way, the way of his father and his father's father. Then Howie wakes up to sounds of someone trying to open his door. On the first floor are two suspicious men obviously talking about Howard. They heard him talking to an old man and plan to get rid of him later. They're going to retrieve something from a tomb though. The tomb that Dream Geezer mentioned? The innkeeper has a lot to say, but most of it isn't that interesting. Argonaut is an old town and the people have their old ways. There is supposedly some sort of epidemic going on, so the police have blocked off certain parts of town, although the keeper questions whether the epidemic is real or just a way to prevent people from going there. This epidemic, whether real or fake, isn't really that relevant in the course of the game though. There are some sections blocked off outside, but I wonder whether the developers intended this to be a bigger storyline initially. He says the old bookshop Worm's Feast is run by Henry Lawrence, who also sells some antiques. The bookseller fought in the War of North Bridge and knows quite a lot about it. Howard then pretends to be interested in the war, claiming he's a writer since he's not supposed to reveal his identity. This bit about going incognito isn't something the game forces you to pay much attention to either. The last semi-relevant thing the innkeeper says is that there are no occupants in the room next to Howard's. The last occupant had killed himself though, but that was a long time ago. The book vendor Henry says he has a copy of Recollections of the Past, but he promised to sell it to someone else a few weeks ago. However, as the other guy hasn't shown up, Howard convinces him to sell it to him instead after chatting a bit about the War of Northbridge. Big emphasis on bit, meaning the war is mentioned but never explained what it was. At this point, I should point out that I have no idea where in the world is Archimand or Wellsmith. Originally, I thought we are in America, since this is Lovecraft stuff, but Howard and many other characters seem to have a British accent.
Howard, where are you? I've been calling you for hours.
I was home. Why? What's the problem?
It makes sense, since Darkness Within is a low-budget Turkish game, that it would be easier to hire British actors than American ones. It's possible there's a hint to the location somewhere I merely missed, but yet it's certainly not obvious. So it begs the question, what exactly was the War of Northbridge? The game never elaborates, despite the two NPCs offering to give more information about it. Henry fought in the war. He seems to be in his 50s or 60s, maybe 70s. The year in the game is 2012, so maybe the war was fought in the 1970s or 80s. Was it the Falklands War and they're in the UK? The characters make it out to sound like the war was fought in their country and not somewhere in the Third World or Middle East or something. As far as I know, neither US or UK have fought a war on their own soil since World War II, and for the US it would go even further. I found Battle of Northbridge in the US from 1775, but I don't think Henry is 2 centuries old vampire. I think the developers just added a mention of the war as some extra background information, not expecting someone like me to think too deeply about it, causing me to lose 1/3 of my sanity over it. Back to the game though. Henry tells us to go get the book from the basement ourselves, since he's got bad legs. His wife is ill and can't help either. There's some other stuff down there too, with a lever with some red stuff on the end. There's a toy jeep and a music box too. Finally though, Howard finds the book. It's enclosed in a metal case, which is locked. Howard, or actually I, thought you needed a key, but that's not the kind of lock it is. Returning to Henry, Howard asks who was the other guy who wanted to buy the book. It was some suspicious guy living in a house in a forest glade. As usual, it's a creepy place with wolves around. Apparently, there was a witch cult there obsessed with mandrake roots. Henry also reveals how his wife has become mad and dreaming about an eclipse. Howard fails to notice the similarity between his dreams and hers. Before leaving, our intrepid detective buys a camera, music box, map, and a toy car from the bookseller. The map allows fast travel. The house in the woods has a book outside in the snow that mentions the cult Children of Dis. The front door is unlocked. Under a table is a chest with another book. It is the journal of Professor Jacob Herbert, who mentions how they've worked with some kind of venomous insects that can cause hallucinations and even death. They've already lost several men in the process. A drawer has tape while another has more documents. They keep talking about the insects and that they're somehow used to manufacture the Dversahe mixture. There are rumors the bugs are of unearthly origin, brought here by other very intelligent race of insects that can travel through space. A single bite from the more regular yet allegedly alien insects won't kill unless you're allergic to them, but it causes delirium. The professor had developed a bug spray to ward them off though, and gives the recipe. On the desk is a puzzle. Solving it reveals a map of some kind. Howard tapes the pieces together. Further along, he finds a frozen corpse with a vial containing ashes and a letter. There are some footprints on the floor, meaning something that is not clear yet. A book laid out on bed explains that strange sounds emanate below. It started after the insects came. They killed 8 men, and instead of burying them, Professor Jacob ordered them thrown into a pit. Mr. Curwen is described as that inhuman thing. There's a lot more detail into the gruesome stuff going on, but at the end is a clue to some of the strange sounds. They are Morse code. The note on the dead man reminds us of Wolfgang Schneider again. It mentions that Shalif bin Humar discovered some strange machines mentioned in a tome, Woko apparatus. Recollections of the past written by Alfred Bolowich during the War of Northbridge supposedly discusses similar matters. This is where the War of Northbridge jumps the shark. Bolowich guy was a medieval alchemist and demonologist. I guess that crosses off the possibility there in the States. Book vendor Henry supposedly fought in the war, yet a medieval alchemist wrote a book during the war, so is Henry a 1,000-year-old vampire then? As far as I know, he isn't, nor did the innkeeper find it odd that Henry could have taken part in the war, so the assumption is that it happened in the 20th century. I think the developers simply did not think things through here, unless I'm missing something. Later on, the letter mentions that the vial found on the dead man contains the ashes of Wolfgang Schneider. It suggests the ashes could be used in some way to summon the dead man. Climbing up a ladder, Howard finds another book. It mentions protective magical sigils. A particularly potent protective sigil is called an Urgerich that requires 16 magical symbols. 4 of them correspond with the cardinal directions. There's a color code for them, with east being red, north white, and so on. It's mentioned if the symbols have to be invisible, they can be drawn with luminescent matter that becomes visible under a strong light source. Finally, Howard, or me, realizes how the locking mechanism on Recollections of the Past works. There are nuts around the cylinder that have to be turned the right way. He remarks he could figure out the right combination if he could hear the clicks. Turns out there's a stethoscope in the bookstore basement under a dragon statue. It suffices to do the trick. The book is written in a cipher system, so Howie cannot read it. There are some pictures, such as a weird grinder machine thingy at the end. He heads back to the house in the woods. There's a hidden drawer under the table with the footprints nearby. It opens up with a crank we found somewhere. Inside is a key. Outside the house are 16 stones, like the Urgerich magical sigil. However, a flashlight is not strong enough to bring out the symbols. The flash of a camera is required. Using a compass that is a bit wonky, Howard deduces the directions. With the help of the tape to get a puzzle and lines going from the center of it, he can figure out which symbols are needed. The puzzle map has the color coding for different cardinal directions. There's a hidden panel on the floor in the room with the footsteps. That's where the symbols have to be input in the correct order. The floor at the end of the room is an elevator platform down. Unfortunately, this is where I experienced the worst crash. There were many crashes during gameplay, but as long as I remember to save often, they weren't a huge problem. This one was different. The game simply froze. Alt plus F4 didn't work. I could open Task Manager, but when I tried to access it, the game window would hog the screen instead, forcing me to reboot the computer. Thankfully, the game worked normally after the reboot, and I no longer experienced this problem. The elevator takes Howard to tunnels underground. He sees those bugs for the first time, unless the moths in Clark Field's house were the same creatures. One of them even stings him, but it doesn't kill or anything. There's a door with a lock, but we don't have the key. Another door opens, revealing a cupboard with a bunch of bugs forming around it. If Howard tries to open it, the bugs attack and he dies. A fit punishment, as it was obvious it's not a smart thing to do. A third door has a lock where you have to input 7 letters correctly. No idea what the code is. Then there's an alchemy lab. It has Morse code list and a sprayer, which is not easy to make out among all the clutter. There's a big ass machine at the back, similar to the one depicted in Recollections of the Past. Going deeper down via stairs next to a large pit, Howard finds a dead guy buried in the wall in another chamber. I don't recall this place having anything to do with completing the game though. Returning to the surface, Howard peruses a shelf and drawers below containing ingredients for making the bug spray, such as basil leaves, geranium, and heath aster. Some of them are to be put into a mortar and pestle, while liquids go directly into the sprayer. Now we have the bug spray. The bug-infested cupboard clears and Howard finds 3 metallic sticks used for an unknown purpose. A box contains 2 phonograph cylinders. The alchemy lab had a phonograph on the big machine. Alas, all he can hear from the phonograph is static cracking. After fiddling with some switches to fix the sound levels, he hears a scientist mention he's going to record something on it, but that's all. The second cylinder is more interesting. The voice calls the machine a tool of the demon. The machine creates a connection to the other world, but if you know how to use it, it's not dangerous. He mentions a secret compartment in front where one has to put a carrier capsule. The voice mentions the code of the machine is 51637. The game does not record this number among the clues. You have to remember it. Darkness Within 1 recorded every conversation in the clue book. Darkness Within 2 does not. The last thing the voice says is that whatever happens, you should not look into the window on the machine after you've summoned something. The scientist had lost 2 assistants like this. They either died or went mad. Next, the insipid detective decides to tackle the letter lock. For that, he has to get stung by the bugs. Then he begins to hear beeping. It's Morse code he can decipher using the paper he found. That's the code. There are coffins inside. One of them contains a strange key. On the table is a metal box which opens with it. Inside is a homunculus made out of mandrake root. It speaks to Howard inside his head. There's a journal talking about the experiments that created the homunculus. There's still one locked door with a regular padlock. You just have to go near it and the homunculus opens it. Not clear why, but okay. Inside is the carrier capsule for the resurrection machine. Back to the surface. There's one closet that was locked. Howard has to insert the 3 metal sticks into the locking mechanism. Fiddle around and it opens, revealing a beekeeper suit to help against the bugs. Then Howard heads back to Argonaut and the bookstore. Henry knows how to decipher recollections of the past, but he's gonna start with the index. Henry mentions how the cipher system was used during the war, so I guess he's not a vampire. Howie heads back to the basement to find another book to help with the translation. I was expecting something to happen down there or when coming back, but no, it's just a bit of busy work. After receiving the book, Henry says we have to wait, but all we have to do is step outside and come back in. According to Henry, translating the whole book would take ages, so he asks Howard to tell him which chapter he wants to read. The correct chapter is named Speaking Machines, yet I had a whole lot of trouble with this one. Supposedly one has to look at the picture of the machine in Recollections of the Past and the machine in the Alchemy Lab. I had done so. Yet the game didn't seem to recognize that. I had to go back to the lab to have a look, and finally Howard could request Henry to translate the chapter. It has instructions on how to use the machine. Howard has to find the hidden panel, input the machine's unique code, then put Schneider's ashes into the capsule and put the capsule in the tray. Then Howard pours gas into the generator and turns it on. The resurrection machine turns on, and our imbecile detective does the one thing he's not supposed to do. He looks into the window on the machine. An undead face appears and Howard passes out. He wakes up on the surface. There's a note with a knife through it saying something in German. Must be a nice guy.
That tattoo on your chest. Doesn't it say die, Bart, die?
No, that's German for the Bart. The.
No one who speaks German could be an evil man.
Henry translates it to say, don't come back, go to the gate. According to our book nerd, There was an old customer who had mentioned living near the gate. He lived in a mansion somewhere far away and is probably dead already. Then Henry mentions Jacob Armitage, who lives nearby, who might know more about the weird old man. His father used to work at his mansion. Jacob has a lot of things to say, so I'll try to summarize. First, he says how he looks just like him, i.e., his dad's mysterious employer. It's Howard's destiny to return here. The man's name is Mr. Nathaniel. He called Howard from beyond time, and Jacob casually name drops Yog-Sothoth. Jacob saw something when he was a child. There was another child who looked normal, but he wasn't human. He spoke with the knowledge of the darkest abysses. The gate is the building nestled over the black abyss. Nathaniel called Howard beyond time since he needed a blood descendant. Nathaniel learned all his occult lore from someone called Jedediah. He's no Jedi? The non-human child is someone Nathaniel was asked to take care of despite the objections of his wife. The kid suffered seizures and had to be locked up after he killed a maid. Eventually they gave the child something to make him calm and forgot what he knew. He grew up like a normal child and left one day. Nathaniel had friends with whom he did all kinds of nerdy, occult stuff. His wife Ingrid hated them. She wanted to escape, but her husband wouldn't let her. One day she ran away though, but was caught. The innkeeper doesn't remember which room the old woman stayed at, but it was on the first floor. He informs Howard of an unpleasant incident that occurred in the mansion in the wilderness. When he was a kid, an old woman from the house stayed at the inn for a while until she was taken away by men with fake beards. The house is empty now and nobody wants to go there. The innkeeper says it's impossible to get there on foot this time of the year, but he knows somebody that can take Howard there. Off to the creepy mansion we go. Howard recognizes the place. He visited it several times as a child. It's his grandfather's house. The front door is locked. Howard finds a shovel next to another building. The lock on the cellar entrance can be broken with it. There's also a well, but it's locked with a strange mechanism. He discovers a lit lantern in the cellar, suggesting somebody else might be there. Howie pushes around some furniture, he refills the generator, and we have electricity. There's a wine cellar that smells like a laboratory as the bottles contain chemicals instead of wine. Eventually he stumbles upon stairs leading up and arrives in the kitchen. It smells like Harmel again. A key cabinet contains the key to the front door. The garage has an old, although seemingly functional car. There's a sledgehammer on the table. A drawer contains a screwdriver. Picking it up crashes the game. Howard picks it up without incident. The second floor triggers some memories. Howard saunters immediately into the bedroom he used to stay at and goes to sleep. He wakes up in the dream as a child again. Something calls to him. Howard picks up a candle, heads out to the well. It's locked with a padlock. The key is in the kitchen. Climbing down, he encounters a cute little thing known as a Shoggoth. An old man, presumably the grandfather, is up above telling him to look at it. Unlike most Shoggoths, this one has a human face inside the amorphous mass. As far as I can tell, this scene doesn't contribute anything to the story beyond giving the developers the excuse to show off a beloved Lovecraftian monster. It's not seen or referred to later on. Waking up in the real world, Howard explores the library. There are classic Mythos tomes on the shelf, but he can't read them. A piece of an old map with coordinates is seen on a table, but as far as I can tell, they mean nothing. Next to it is a note talking about an unspeakable ceremony, flute music, and Nyarlathotep. Grandma's room has an empty jewelry box, but our intrigued detective finds a secret bottom in it. There's an envelope containing Grandma's journal. She complains about her husband Nathaniel. The 2 first years of their marriage were great, but she got ill and they moved from downtown Wellsmouth into this mansion. It had been built by Nathaniel's ancestors, although it had been empty for years. The locals in Argoment were hostile towards them as the Lorry lineage had always been despised in the town. Nathaniel began to change. In his dreams he spoke with Jedediah Loreed. Nathaniel became obsessed with his lineage. Eventually their son Williams was born. Yes, his name apparently is Williams, not William. He is Howard's dad. The grandma blames Nathaniel's occultist friends for poisoning his mind. At some point, a stranger arrived with a little boy. He went away, but left the boy to live with them. The next entry is a few years later. Williams visited them after graduating from college. He brought his wife and kid, Howard, with him. The grandma didn't even know he had gotten married as he was estranged from his family, for a good reason. Nathaniel looked at Howard in a disturbing way that the grandma didn't like. The last entry states that she couldn't take it. She left taking a shiny metallic thing with her that Nathaniel was always wearing around his neck. She didn't know what it was except that it was important. Howard heads back to the library and notices a black mirror shaped like a shouting soy jack. There's also a creaky floorboard under which is a hidden compartment with a skeletal key and letter. The letter is addressed to Howard by Nathaniel, his grandfather. He admits he summoned Howard beyond time by appealing to Yog-Sothoth. He was guided by Jedediah the Wise. The plan is for Jedediah to possess Howard's body. It has to be one of the same blood, so that's the raison d'etre of Howie Boy. An object that acts as a key is mentioned consisting of 3 parts. Howard guesses that one of them will be in the tomb with Nathaniel. When he has all 3 parts, he needs to find the sacrificial dagger. Grandpa is so nice telling his grandson he does not need to be afraid, as it's a great honor to be possessed by Jedediah. Such a swell grandparent. Next, Howard heads outside to the crypt where we got the shovel. The door opens with the skeletal key. There are more crocodile dude statues and coffins. The place reminds me of Skyrim. Alas, no Draugr ambush us. To his surprise, Howard finds his father's coffin and even his own. The spot is waiting for him, apparently. His grandfather's coffin is there, but the shiny metal trinket is not. Howard deduces it was stolen by those 2 shifty men he saw in Argoment. A snowstorm brews outside. He returns to the mansion. There are sounds of rats in the walls. Our icy detective decides to follow them. He sees the rodents scurry into the basement. On the wall is a large message. Welcome back, Howard. Then he goes to the wine cellar to see some of the floorboards removed, revealing a spiral staircase. Or at least that's how it was supposed to go. But due to the darkness, I could not for the life of me even see the staircase on the floor, even though I was using a flashlight. I had to resort to a YouTube walkthrough to see where I was going. Sometimes this game was simply too dark, and not in the sense that it was edgy or scary. Down there is a metal gate. On the other side, Howard sees a bunch of guys in robes walking. A floating zombie man says welcome, and Howard wakes up on the bed. Downstairs, Howard runs into a dark, cadaverous, hooded man. He's coughing as if sick and informs he is Loath Nolder. He's switched bodies or something, although I'm not sure if we've ever seen how Loath Nolder normally looks like. He says time is short and they have to stop them, the bad guys. Nolder has given Howard a drug to slow down the process of Jedediah possessing him. He says they have to find an entrance to the sunken city below them. 5 years prior, Nolder had gone on a trip. In some remote forest village in an unknown non-European country, the shaman said he knew who he was. That Nolder was born there of a European father and an unknown mother. So I guess they are in Europe. She disappeared after having given birth, and the villagers were relieved by that. He spent his childhood there learning their inhuman traditions. They were constantly telling him that his body was just a vessel waiting to be filled with the true essence. Sort of like Howard. They would summon a god through his body. There's a long-winded story of how snake men presumably made him pass out during the rituals and stole his body, but Nolder stole a guide's body instead. He was buried alive too. Very exciting. Nolder had taken Howard out of the asylum. If he had stayed, he'd been completely possessed by now. The next day, the storm is gone. Howard returns to the basement. The spiral staircase is covered by wooden boards again, but the sledgehammer can change that. There are some stone corridors down there, but the way is blocked by collapsed debris. In a room, we see Loath Nolder again, just standing around. He explains it's a necropolis down there, but parts have collapsed so they can't reach the place. There should be another way, though. It was built by reptiles. Nolder says the children of these want to revive the long disappeared reptilian race and their god. When Howard asks how can they stop the bad guys, all Nolder can say is that they have to invoke Nyarlathotep before the rite and do something with an antique crystal. At the end he gives one piece of the metallic object, so we need two more. In another room there are more bugs, a bowl for a ceremonial fire and a bottle with special liquid. None of that is relevant yet though. There is a key though. Wearing the beekeeper outfit is advised. Further on there is a bridge leading to a crocodile man statue holding the sacrificial dagger, but Howard can't get it yet. Back in the mansion, the key opens a door in the kitchen with weird statues and pictures. It's just some bonus stuff, mostly. Afterwards, it's finally time to leave the mansion. Howard gasses up the car and drives back to Argonaut. Henry is not at Worm's feast, but the door is open. There's a book on the counter from some random guy named Lovecraft. Since we're alone, Howard goes to snoop down in the basement. The homunculus suddenly activates, revealing a hidden door. In the secret room, we find Henry's wife's body. She appears to have been murdered in a ritual of some sort. Henry was a psycho all along? This revelation, as far as I can tell, doesn't really have much effect on the story and feels like it's there to add another small mystery into the game in addition to making things more gruesome. It's not like we can use it to blackmail Henry for information or anything like that, nor can we go to the police. I don't see much purpose beyond their shock value. Howard spots two shady guys at the inn who presumably stole the object from his grandfather's casket. He follows them outside. Thankfully, there are no god-awful stealth mechanics to play by. They go down to the sewers. As is to be expected, it's dark. Howard has to navigate a maze, a simple yet dark one. There are no traps or monsters to avoid. There's a broken down wall with a passage leading to a hideout. It used to be a nursing home. Mostly it's just old furniture now, but one room has a display case with one of the metal objects around Harambe's neck. Alas, there's an alarm system. Howard gains access to it underneath the cabinet. He opens up the toy car he bought long ago with a screwdriver and switches the battery on the alarm system. That disables it. To be honest, I'm not quite sure how it works. It just does. He gets the second piece of the key thingy. Leaving the hideout, Howard gets clobbered by one of the ruffians. He's locked in a room. He hears his captors talking about screams in the sewers and how they have to be careful not to attract whatever is there. One of them is confident since they have firepower. 30 seconds later, something comes to tell them their firepower is lacking. The door seems to be unlocked. The two guys are dead. Howard retrieves his stuff. The dead men also have a crank of some kind. Our incandescent detective heads back through the sewers to the surface. There's nobody at the inn, so Howard steals a couple of keys. One of them conveniently is for the room on the first floor where his grandma stayed all those years ago. There's a hidden compartment under the bed where we can find the last object. They combine into the eye symbol we've seen around a few times. There's also the room on the second floor where someone had killed himself. The room smells bad. The homunculus activates again and opens the toilet door. There's a dead body. He's got a press card saying his name is Carl Paleo. Not sure what's the significance of the guy. He was probably snooping around where he shouldn't have. There was an article or a journal written by him outside the cabin in the woods. Howard goes back to the mansion. The crank unlocks the well. Howie says he won't go down without the sacrificial dagger, though. He goes down again all the way to the statue with the dagger. Now it has a ring with some powder inside. Howard returns to the room with the bugs. He pours some special liquid into the bowl and adds powder from the ring, causing a blue flame to appear. It means enlightenment or something. And the bugs disperse. Now, as the insidious detective returns to the statue, the hand holding the dagger is open. Before going down the well, Howard goes to the secret room by the kitchen. One of the statues has the family ring. It's supposedly needed for some of the alternate endings. The retard that he is, Howard falls from the ladder down into the well. He is uninjured though. Ahead is a metal elevator with a steam puzzle on the floor. We descend below into Rapture from Bioshock. Beyond that are fancy yet ominous stone corridors. Howard sees Edwin Pickman's ghost or something until the ceiling collapses on top of him. After that, 12 pieces of a poem appear in the corridor. That's exactly what the endgame needed. Busy work. At the end of the corridors is a huge eye. Howard stabs it with a dagger. It activates a monster head on the wall, giving us access to a dial puzzle. The poem provides the answers to it. When that is done, a door that was previously locked is unlocked. It leads to a less fancy tunnel. There we see Henry and the innkeeper on the other side of a gap. Howard remarks how they are murderers. I'm not sure what their role was. Were they part of the cult? Are we already in a dream since the way the characters appear in random places doesn't seem normal? Eventually, Howard comes to a door that opens with the eye symbol. Despite all the hype, the epic key is only used to open a modest door in a dingy corridor. He arrives at a huge chamber with actual giant crocodile-headed men. A bald man sits on a throne in front of an altar. He is Nyarlathotep. In front of him is a huge red ruby. Howard gets a vision of something I assume to be Yog-Sothoth, or maybe just another form of the crawling chaos. He's pressuring Howard to follow his ancestors. Our insane detective refuses to obey. Then Loath Nolder appears, telling us not to heed Nyarlathotep's words. We should break the crystal instead. So Howard stabs it with the dagger. Everything begins to break. Howard runs, but it's too late. We get a summary of reports from various newspapers what happened at the newly discovered archaeological site. There had been an earthquake and a human corpse was discovered. His name was Howard E. Loreed, a mental patient from Wellsmouth Mental Institution. The authorities are baffled how he ended down there. Still, the world remains ignorant of the horrors beyond, so it's not all bad, right? At the end, we see inhuman figures around a coffin underground. Presumably, Howard is lying dead there. That is, however, only one of the endings. In the other option, Howard stabs Loath Nolder instead of the crystal. However, Nolder says you can't kill something that is already dead, takes the dagger and stabs Howard.
Who's already dead, Howard? No, not Howard. He's gone now. I'm sorry, but I have to do this.
Then we get the same articles, but the camera pan underground shows Howard to be alive, although I presume it to be Jedediah in his body. According to the achievements, the first option is the pessimistic or bad ending, whereas the one where Howard is alive, presumably possessed, is the lesser of two evils. Not sure I agree. Supposedly there is an ending where Howard simply escapes instead of going down the well and facing Nyarlathotep. But to get that you have to get one clue at the beginning of the game that I missed. It involves combining a bunch of clues together. The ending is left a bit vague, nor is there much difference between the two main endings, but in a horror game like this it's basically what you'd expect. That, however, is the pair of Lovecraftian games called Darkness Within 1 and 2. I had thought it was intended to be a trilogy, but apparently not. They're janky, buggy, especially the second one, and so dark at times it's hard to see, but the mood and the atmosphere are great. The slow-paced investigation and reading of well-written documents is comfy. Highlighting keywords in texts works with mixed results. The puzzles are mostly reasonable, although occasionally a bit too obtuse. The idea of combining clues is not used much and not well implemented. Oh yeah, and the Darkness Within games definitely fail the Bechdel test, which is good, as I think the only female character in the game is Howard's grandmother, who is long dead, and we only get to know her through her journal entries. The ambient music and sounds are pretty atmospheric too. The main difference between In Pursuit of Loath, Nolder and the Dark Lineage, besides the controls, are the subtlety of the first game and the more blatant inclusion of all kinds of dark occult things in the second. I prefer the way things were handled in the first, yet it is inevitable that things will have to escalate, so I can't complain too much. I still like the second game as well. Reading the documents, we came across a bunch of different names and characters whom we never meet, like Ivar Bergen, Mr. Kerven, Shalif bin Humar, or Jacob Herbert. For some, their role and significance are obvious, while the others remain obscure. For example, what was the point in resurrecting Wolfgang Schneider just to learn about the gate, and what did he do afterwards, after he was brought back? The story was relatively straightforward to follow as long as you don't try to untangle every loose end. What significance did Henry Lawrence murdering his wife have to Howard's personal quest? And was Henry a 1,000-year-old vampire having fought in the War of Northbridge? Who was the weird non-human child who lived with Nathaniel? Was he Howard? Or did he replace Howard? Or was it Loath Nolder or someone else like the Shoggoth in the well? Maybe somebody on the internet knows the answers, but I don't. Always remember, though, that the world is dark and you have to avoid falling off.